Hey leader, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Baratongue Advisors. We're also recording live from the new Return.com studio. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll enjoy our content and become a subscriber. Know that you can also watch all of our episodes over on our YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed there as well. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while and it's made an impact on your life, it would mean the world to me if you would leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever app you listen to podcasts through. That really does help us to grow our audience and reach more leaders, so thank you in advance for that. Well, leader, in today's episode, you'll hear my conversation with Molly Fletcher. If you're unfamiliar with Molly, let me just tell you a little bit about her. Hailed as the female Jerry Maguire by CNN, Molly Fletcher made a name for herself as one of the first female sports agents. During her almost two-decade career and as president of CSE, Molly negotiated over $500 million in contracts and represented over 300 of sports' biggest names, including Hall of Fame pitcher John Smoltz, PGA Tour golfer Matt Kuchar, broadcaster Erin Andrews, and basketball championship coaches Tom Izzo and Doc Rivers. As a world's top 50 keynote speaker, she delivers her inspiring message to audiences around the world. She is also author of 5 books, including The Energy Clock, Fearless at Work, and A Winner's Guide to Negotiating. Molly is the founder and host of the Game Changers with Molly Fletcher podcast, where she interviews experts and celebrities in every field, including Arthur Blank, Dabo Sweeney, John Mackey, Matthew McConaughey, and Simon Sinek. Her insights have been featured in prestigious media outlets including CNN, ESPN, Forbes, Fast Company, InStyle, and Sports Illustrated. As the founder of the Molly Fletcher Company, she helps leaders transform workplace complacency with her Game Changer negotiation training and the Energized Leader programs. And if you've never heard Molly before, get ready, buckle up. She is incredible. And in the conversation, you're going to hear Molly share the lessons that she's learned from working with some of the world's peak performers as a sports agent, her thoughts on youth sports, her advice to women in leadership, and of course, I take her through the lightning round at the end. You're going to love this interview, but before we dive in, just a few announcements. This episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast is sponsored by Baratongue Advisors. The financial advisors at Baratongue Advisors help educate and empower clients to make informed financial decisions. You can find out how Baratongue Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future by visiting their website at baratongueadvisors.com. That's BERATUNG advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Baratongue Advisors, LPL Financial, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. I also want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny, and my wife, Laura, and I got our engagement and wedding rings through Henny Jewelers and had an incredible experience. And not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, for every couple that comes in engaged, they give them a book to help them prepare for marriage, and we just love that. So if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out Henny Jewelers. And I also want to thank our new sponsor, Return.com. And leader, let me just ask you this. Have you ever had an interest in investing in real estate? Well, now for as little as $500, you can become a commercial real estate investor. Just visit Return.com to learn more. That's REITURN.com. Investing involves risk. Please consult the Return Offering Circular if you're interested in investing. And with all that being said, let's dive right in. Here's my interview with Molly Fletcher. Molly Fletcher, welcome to the L3 Leadership Podcast. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I just want to give people a little bit of background on you. You were deemed the female Jerry Maguire and in the sports agency world, and can you just give us a brief history of why you were deemed that and how you got into that industry?
You bet. Well, I think there was probably a bored journalist one day that thought, well, this ought to be kind of fun and an easy way to help people understand what this lady does. So I think CNN it sort of came up with that and ran with it. But, I got into it. I was a student athlete at Michigan State where I played tennis, and I had wanted to stay in the business of sports, Doug, but I didn't know what that would look like, right? Really. And so I moved down to Atlanta from Lansing to get a job in sports and did a couple odds and ends things. And then I got an opportunity with a small agency where I was a marketing coordinator, which was going and getting endorsement deals and appearances for the, half a dozen athletes that we had. We had a couple NBA coaches and a couple baseball players. And once I had kind of gotten into it and I was bringing these guys appearances and deals and building relationships with them. And then I started to see, gosh, the way we're going to really grow is through getting more athletes and coaches and negotiating more of their primary contracts. And so I put a business plan together for our CEO to say, hey, let's go get more baseball players. We got Georgia Tech, the Braves, right? Minor league teams. And he blessed it. And I was sort of off to the races. Now it took me time to kind of get big league guys, et cetera. And then it just really evolved from there pretty organically over about an 18-year period of time. So it was awesome.
Well, how old were you when you went to your CEO to put together that plan?
I was probably, Doug, about 24.
Wow.
24. So I was young. I mean, what happened was I had driven Lenny Wilkins around. He was the head coach of the Dream Team. And I'd been his sort of little like driver, taking him to all of his appearances and various obligations while he was the head coach of the Dream Team in Atlanta for the Olympics. And then when that finished, I was sort of wrapping all of that up. And that had been pretty consuming for the beginning part of my experience at the agency. And that was when I thought, how are we going to grow? Right. And, I'm a big believer, right? You got to ask for what you want. You got to go for it. You got to get out of your comfort zone. And I was fortunate to be in an environment where he blessed it and let me run with it, which I'm super grateful for, of course.
Yeah. It's not every day I get to talk to someone that was in the sports agency field. I'm curious, can you just talk to people? What do you wish people knew about what it's actually like to represent athletes and coaches, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think probably the biggest, it's not about sports, ironically, right? Wow. It's about business. And whenever I get young people that are like, I just love sports, I know all the stats, I'm a fan of it, we don't hire fans, right? We hire people who want to help ensure that we can capitalize on a window of time that is remarkably unique for an athlete or a coach. I mean, they do what most of us do in a lifetime in 4 years or 5 years or 3 years, and maximizing and capitalizing on that on and off the field is imperative. So it's not about the fact that you are a great baseball player. It's about recognizing the business opportunity inside of that sports experience that the athlete is experiencing.
Yeah. What did you love about being a sports agent?
Being around peak performers. I mean, we, Doug, were very intentional about the kind of athletes and coaches that we signed. And we signed people and worked with good people, right? I mean, it's a 24/7 deal, right? So your phone's ringing all the time. And as I got more established, I mean, I wanted to like them, right? Like I wanted to like the guy that was calling me when I was pushing my daughter on a swing on a Saturday morning, right? I wanted to like him. And so that relationship component was imperative to have and to work with good people, with great people. And we did that. And I'm grateful for that for sure.
Yeah. Is there anything you hated about it?
What I didn't love about it was that it was 24/7. I mean, the phone by the bed, I had a coach once that was interviewing for a job and it came up on the ticker and it progressed through and, at 2 a.m. my phone rang and he was hot and lit up. And so that part of it, and really you're just always on call. I mean, because at any moment, and as my career progressed, I had about 300 athletes and coaches, a team of agents. When you have 300 people, college coaches, NBA coaches, tour players, baseball players, minor league guys, broadcasters who are waking up every day and doing what they do, inevitably they get fired, hired, injured, healthy, traded, released. It's constant. Wow. So that part of it, I don't miss. In the spirit of, as a wife and as a mother who values that deeply, I think that was the part that was the hardest, was navigating those moments when I was with my family.
Yeah. I'm curious. We're going to be talking about what you learned through Peak Performers and all of those things, but were there one or two coaches or anyone that you interacted with over the years that really taught you valuable life lessons or became a mentor that significantly transformed your life?
Well, I mean, gosh, 100%. I mean, I would say first and foremost, it's my parents, absolutely. But from a client perspective specifically, John Smoltz was a guy and is a guy who I was always fascinated with his capacity. And what I mean by that is, John would call me on his way to the park on a day he's pitching. And the things that he was navigating off the field, and maybe even on, right? Maybe it's an injury. Maybe it's something he's having to compensate for with his shoulder or his elbow or finger or something. And so the physical component that he was navigating, and then the personal, right? Like things with his children or his wife or his parents or and the things that he had going on in his life. And then I would watch him pull up to the ballpark, 3:00, walk in, prep for the game, go out and throw 7 or 8 scoreless innings, sit guys down and lead, right? And do it with integrity and high character. And his capacity to perform under pressure. And in what the world saw, I saw all the other things. They saw the guy having to change his arm slot a little bit. They had no idea what he was dealing with off the field.
Wow.
So when I started a college coaching division, I wanted to go get my alma mater, Tom Izzo. And so I recruited him and signed him. And I so distinctly remember one day flying in to go meet with him and see him. And then I ended up going to a game that night. And I remember before the game, and it was like an hour before tip off. And Tom's like, come with me. I got to go do this these are some of our big sponsors and donors and whatever. And they've been ticket holders for a long time. And so we go down under and we go back, and he walks into this room with probably 100 people. Most of them were like 85 years old plus. And he gives him this little behind the curtain. Hey, here's what you want to look for. Here's what's going to happen. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. And we leave. And I look at him and I was like, dude, tip-off's in 45 minutes. Like, what? Do you do that every home game? And he goes, yeah. And I go, you go do that every home game to that room. And he goes, all the time. He goes, Molly, I've been doing it since I started, and I can't stop. I can't let him down now. And I'm like, wow, so cool, right? So he to me, what I love about Tom is he hasn't changed, right? Like he's won national championships. He's a legend as a college coach. He's had incredible success, but he's never changed. And he's always taken care of his community. And he loves his players so much, both when they're serving him, right? Like Dabo Sweeney says, right? Serve their heart, not their talent. He does that all the time. And that's why guys come back and support the program and him and all that. So those are a couple guys that come up for me, but I could go on and on. I mean, I'm grateful for, the Ernie Johnson. Are you kidding me? Ernie Johnson, incredible human being. I mean, EJ, you see him on TV, right? You see him bookending, Shaq and Charles and Kenny. And then what a lot of people didn't see was, we would go have lunch and he'd show up in a minivan with his son, Michael, who recently passed away, who was very disabled. And, he'd pull him out and we'd wheel him in, and, EJ would feed him and we'd rub his head. He always loved that. And I thought, wow. I mean, so I think probably the guys and the gals that didn't change, that recognized they had a unique platform and they could use it for good.
Yeah, I want to have 2 follow-up questions. First, on the John Smoltz story, I am curious. You just talked about everything going on in their lives. Can you speak to sports fans? Because I think, if you just hop on Facebook and look at Facebook comments after a game on a particular athlete or a coach, it's brutal. And I think sometimes people actually forget that these are real people with real feelings. If you could say something to fans listening about just individuals' personal lives, what would you tell them?
Well, I would say, one thing I would tell you is I tell my guys, and most of them don't read it. They don't read it. They don't read it. Their mom reads it. Their sister reads it. Their wife reads it. But the smart ones, the good ones, the really good, they don't read it. That's why they're good. They don't pay attention to the noise. They just don't. And so, I would say go ahead and write it to their mom and their sister and their wife, because that's who's reading it. And, and I think to your point, they're people. And I think the world goes, yeah, but they make $1 million a month. So that's not normal. So they should hear all these things I have to say about them. The good ones don't listen, because if they did, it would destroy them.
You also mentioned that the good ones don't change. They're not changed by the $1 million paycheck. They're not changed by the platform that they're given. I'm just curious, in your career, what has been the impact of money and fame on people? How have you seen that influence people?
Well, it certainly does. I mean, I would say the people who are well rooted, whether it be in their faith, in their values, morals, they do fine. The ones that aren't settled in there before they get there, and those are the ones that I think struggle with what it really is and what negative impact it could potentially have on you. So I think the most important thing, obviously, they can't necessarily totally control the way they were potentially brought up and the influence they had relevant to faith and values and morals. But what they can do is work hard to ensure they have people around them that want nothing from them, but for them to be the best version of themselves. And unfortunately, what happens when I used to say to players when they'd be a projected first round draft pick and they were going to make $10 million, right? And they're 18 years old and they come from a middle class family maybe. And I say, you think you're a pretty good looking dude. And they're like, this is weird. This lady is 40 years old. She asked me, you think you're a pretty good looking dude? They're like, well, I mean, I guess a little, I don't know. I mean, sort of. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you put $10 million in your bank account and you're smoking hot. Right? So just remember. And so to me, it's get the people around you who need nothing, who want nothing, who aren't interested in talking about their relationship with you to their buddies at the country club, that don't want to manage your money, that is a really big deal in order to keep them rooted and to have people around you that you listen to who tell you things you don't want to hear, but you need to hear, who tell you that, look, you haven't hit a ball in the big leagues. You haven't thrown a pitch in the big leagues. You haven't done anything. You don't need to buy the girl you've been dating for 2 months a Mercedes. Let's not do that right now, right? Even though you can, and that makes you feel good, they need people that will level set them on those things. Because what happens is and I watch this happen as when you're making $1 million a month, you lose perspective and you think it will happen forever. And it doesn't. No matter who you are, it's not going to last. It's going to end. You're going to retire. It's going to go away, or you're going to drop into maybe a media career where it's less. So you got to have people around you that help you make smart long-term decisions.
And I think I've heard you mentioned your parents were extremely influential in your life. I think I heard you on another podcast when I was researching for this. Your mom has really helped you stay grounded from what I understand, because you obviously have done well and have had some amazing experiences. Can you talk about your mom's influence in your life when it comes to staying grounded?
Well, I mean, Doug, she is still, I talk to her and my parents, I talk to them every morning, every single morning. I call them from wherever, and sometimes twice a day. Sometimes I call the third time and they're like, what do you want? But at 51, that's probably a little bit odd, but they are, so incredibly, they're incredible people. But I would say the biggest thing was there was a lot of moments early in my career where I would call my mom and I would go, Mom, check this out. We're flying private into Miami. We're going to a boat. Michael Jordan, Jim McMahon, like whoever, right, is coming over or whatever. And she'd listen. And then she'd say, who's got the girls? Because we have 3 daughters. Who's got them? Are they good? Are they okay? Wow. When are you coming back? How long are you going to be gone? Right? She didn't care at all. And so that was, kind of always there and always kept me front and center relevant to family and our girls, and kept me squared away. Because I think had I had somebody that was going, awesome, cool, and then what, and then what, and then what? But I always had this tug to get back home as soon as I could, because there was no one else who can raise my girls as their mother. There's nobody else to give me my husband's wife, right? So she kept me kind of squared away in that regard, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. And I don't know that I would have gone wildly off track, candidly, because I'm grateful for the way that I was raised and sort of those values. But she kind of helped me do that. And then there was times where I was, when I started speaking and traveling and that sort of started to take off a bit, where I I was finding myself having to figure out how to navigate that. It was this new arena, if you will, and I was having to navigate my schedule and what to say yes to and no to, and the girls and she always kind of helped me with that, right? Like, I know you love it, and I know it's fulfilling, and I know that but let's bookend it so that you know how many keynotes you can do in a week before it's too much, how much travel you can do in a week before it's too much, right? And so she's just been a rock for me, and always kind of speaks the truth with love. And she can say something like that it'll level set me pretty quick, as can my husband, which is great.
Oh, thank God for both of those people in your life. Just a random question. I'm a father of 4. We just had our 4th child in December. A lot of fun. It sounds like you were parented well. I'm assuming, based on the choices and the priorities you've just mentioned, that you're parenting well as well. Any parenting tips for us with young ones?
Well, gosh, man. I mean, yes. I mean, obviously, you probably don't need any, and I'm sure with 4, what a gift, man. Are you wrapping that party up,
Yep. Yeah. My wife's made it very, very clear that this is the last time she is doing this.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think I remember so often people saying it goes so fast and you're so tired, you're not sleeping, all those things. And you're like, and my mom used to say, it's the days that drag, it's the years that fly by. And it does go fast, and soak it all in and enjoy it all, because it goes fast, and it is the greatest gift, and every stage of it is the best. Our girls now are in college, and I talk to them every day as well, which I'm grateful for. They call a lot, which I love. But, and then I think the question I get a lot, though, Doug, is relevant to parents' role with kids in sports. And to me, we've got to recognize that kids drive that. I think we live in a world now where parents are over-indexing on the outcomes with their children. And I think what I would just pray and ask parents to do is to recognize that there's very few that are really going to make a living doing it. So let's look at sports as a laboratory for life, to learn how to be a part of a team, to take feedback, to navigate change and challenges, and to have difficult conversations with a coach if we're not playing where and when we want to. It's just an incubator for what's to come. And when we try to drive that too much, we lose what is such an unbelievable opportunity for our kids to learn and grow. And I say that from someone who played competitive tennis growing up with 2 parents who sometimes couldn't take me to practice, and I'd ride my bike because I loved it, who, when I'd split sets with somebody, they had no idea what to coach me on or tell me to do. They just filled up my water bottle and gave me a banana. And because of that, I had the drive and the ambition to want to keep playing. And I played, at Michigan State, and then competed, and then earned a scholarship. And what mattered to them was that I was learning so many things as a part of the sport of tennis that I was learning so many things as a part of tennis that then could be translated into life, and it has. So I think our role as parents in sports is something we should deeply consider, and to be highly aware of the impact that we have on our children relevant to fulfillment versus achievement. Learning inside of that platform is such a gift. And as parents, we can't steal that from them. Let them unlock that next level inside of themselves while supporting and loving them. I think, and then I'll stop. But the biggest, probably tactical piece of advice is I'd give parents: when you get in the car with your child after you leave a sporting event, don't say anything. Just ask them one question: where do you want to go eat?
That's good.
Where do you want to go eat?
I am curious, just being that you went all in on tennis, did you play multiple sports growing up? Do you encourage people to do multiple sports and then, pick one as they get into high school? Any advice there? I'm just curious now, because I feel like there's so many options with our kids. I'm like, they could do anything. Sure. This is overwhelming. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I did. I played basketball and I swam, and then I played tennis. And then when I got to high school, And I was a tomboy growing up. My brothers were 5 years older than me and were, treated me like a little brother. But and all those sports in Michigan where I grew up were all in the fall, and I had to pick basketball, swimming, or tennis. And that tennis was kind of my newest sort of interest, and so that was what I leaned into, and I loved it, and I'm glad I did. I would say yes, it's a gift to play lots of different sports. I know we live in a world where that can be hard because of travel teams and all that kind of stuff. But as long as they want to play a lot of sports, I'd let them play a lot of sports. Until for whatever reason, the sport that they're playing or their love for that sport requires more of them, then maybe you can have that singular focus. But if you look at all-stars and Hall of Famers, now granted, the world's changed a little bit with travel ball and these seasons are longer than ever, et cetera. Many of them played a lot of sports. They did an instrument. I mean, John Smoltz played the accordion because his dad made him, and he hated it. But his dad's a big accordion player, and so John would have to play the accordion, and he hated it. And then he'd run out after he played the accordion and go try to throw a baseball against the brick wall of their house because that's what he really loved. So the opportunity for I'm sorry, you can cut this out. I lost my train of thought for a minute. The opportunity to play multiple sports, it makes you stronger. It makes you more versatile. It makes you better. It makes you do all those things. So, and we're seeing that now. I mean, the data shows that.
Yeah. Going back to your experience as a sports agent, I do want you to brag if you can. You talked about flying private planes with Michael Jordan, et cetera. Do you have an experience or two that you're just like, that was unbelievable, I'll never forget that for the rest of my life, that you can actually share with everyone?
I would say probably the coolest was when we had about 10 guys-ish, and we flew from Atlanta over to Augusta to play the National. Wow. And that was pretty cool. I mean, that was really, really cool. To just have the opportunity to go play, obviously, is such a special thing. And then to be able to do it with, a bunch of really great clients and players was super fun. So that would be one. And then I would say some of them were, there was a player that I recruited for 2 years, and it took so long. It was so hard, and I love this guy. And we finally kind of got to where he was ready to lock and load and sign with us. And we flew down to sort of the panhandle of Florida and went out to dinner, and then opened a bottle of champagne, and he signed, and we toasted. And it had just been a culmination of so much hard work to get to that place with him, and then to finally sort of ink it and to bring him inside and be able to work with him officially was just awesome. So things like that were super fun too.
Yeah. Last fun question before I dive more into what you learned from all these athletes. Do you have sports teams that you actually cheer for that they're like, this is my team, or do you just cheer for everyone and have an appreciation for all sports?
Well, I mean, when I was an agent, no, I really didn't. I mean, I obviously have an affinity for Michigan State, and you can't really peel that out of me. But yeah, I really cheer for people probably more than anything, less so for a team per se. With the exception of Michigan State, I'm always rooting for my home team.
Okay, well, hey, let's dive into what you actually learned. So you've got to work with peak performers who went all the way, won championships. And then I'm sure you worked with people who were thinking they were going to be all that all-star MVP, et cetera, and then they just fizzled out after a year or two. What have you learned about what separates great players from players who don't make it?
Well, to me, it's really pretty simple, honestly, Doug. I think it's an internal drive to get better every day. So the ones that make it and stay there are the ones that every single day are trying to get a little bit better and who are never complacent. And they have a mindset that is committed to consistent development. And what's interesting about this in a way is they're not driven to achieve, because that's not sustainable. They're driven to get better every day. And to me, that's the irony in it, right? You'd think they wake up every day to achieve. And that is a North Star for them, obviously. They want to win. But what they actually wake up every day and want to do is to get a little bit better. And part of that is a as a result of there are guys and gals right behind the talent, if you will. So there are players right behind the starting, first baseman for a big league club, waiting, trying to take his job every single day. Every single day they're working their tails off, and there's several of them. And so he has to get better every day or he loses his job, right? And I saw that all the time, right? Coaches, they have to win and get better and recruit and continue to sustain it, or they lose their job. Golfers, they're only as good as their last tournament. They're only, unless they've won a major or a tournament, they don't have exemptions. So they don't have a job next year if they don't perform. And the irony is, Doug, I lived in that world for so long. I thought the rest of the world operated like this, right? Like I thought everybody in the world woke up every day and wanted to get a little bit better. But sadly, that's not the case. But I think it's a better way to live your life. I think it's a more fulfilling way to live your life. And I'm not suggesting that it's about going for more or having more or making more. I'm suggesting that living a life of a desire and a mindset to get better every day is a more fulfilling way to live your life. I think if you align your values and your goals with your behaviors, then the outcome of that is a better version of you every single day. And that's more fulfilling. In other words, I think that if we're aligning our values and our goals with what matters most, it actually offsets burnout. I think the reason that people are so burned out is because the work they're doing isn't aligned with their deepest values. It isn't aligned with what matters most to them. Because, I would argue that Oprah, she's probably never been burned out, right?
Wow.
I don't know that Tom Brady's ever been burned out, right? I don't know that Tiger Woods has ever been burned out. It's what he loves to do. It's what he knows. And it's what it is his calling at some level. I think he would believe he was given a gift. He certainly capitalized on it with a ton of drive. But, to me, Webster got the definition wrong of drive. I think Webster says that drive is the desire to achieve. I don't think it is. I think that drive is an inherent desire to get better every day and aligning that behavior and that mindset with your values.
Yeah, I'm curious. And for those listening, if you haven't watched, Molly has a phenomenal TEDx talk that she gave. You can find it anywhere. We'll include links to it in the show notes, but on this subject. I am curious, from someone who is always looking for talent, have you found that drive is something that some people have and some people don't, or is it a skill that can be developed?
It's absolutely a skill that can be developed. No question about it. I think that we could have some predisposition to some things, no question about it. But it is something that is inside of all of us. All of us desire to have a deeper purpose, a deeper calling. I think all of us, it's human nature to want to have purpose. You think about the thing and connection with others, right? That's just human. So to me, drive is about aligning our purpose with our behaviors. So I absolutely believe all of us have God-given gifts and an internal drive to find a way to unlock that. And what we need, though, if we don't necessarily have that as something that's threaded through us deeply, we need to know how to unlock it. We need to know how to unlock the drive that lives in us, that we know we want more, but we don't know what that is, right? We know that we're burned out, or we know that we're exhausted, or we know that we're not living our best life, or we know we're not as fulfilled as we could be, and we don't really know what to do about it. And to me, it's things like mindset, it's things like curiosity, it's things like connection, it's confidence. Driven people are confident people. They're purpose-centered. I think super driven people are very intentional about where and what and who they give their energy to, more than their time, even at some level, right? They're very clear on that. So it's a muscle, right? That we've got to strengthen and unlock, and we all have it and we all can.
Yeah. And for leaders listening, I think every one of us would say we want to fill our organization with leaders and young potential that has drive. Is that because it sounds like it's separate than talent? You can have talent, but if you don't have drive, you ultimately won't reach your potential. Is it something you can just spot and be like, yep, they got it? Or is it something that you had to kind of unlock? You were talking about mindsets, intentionality. Is that really just, I guess, in the business world, more in the interview process of actually asking questions of what is your mind? I'm just curious, how do you see if someone has?
How do you discern it? Right. Yeah. I mean, well, 100%. I mean, I'd hire somebody with drive who I know that I can teach them a skill set all day long, because that's a wonderful thing. And because you want, and then if they have a lot of talent, then you want to ask great questions so you can discern if they can understand that that's not enough. Talent is not enough. I saw so many unbelievable athletes who had a lot of talent. We've all seen that never made it, right? And you can have great hires or great employees who are really smart and have a lot of talent. But if they don't want it themselves and they're not going to allow you to help them be curious enough about how to unlock it, then to me, that's not somebody that we want to bring into our organization, right? We want to bring in people that are insatiably curious, right? That want to understand how they can unlock another version of themselves every day. And like I said, I think that is anchored in curiosity. So the biggest thing I always want to make sure of when I'm hiring somebody is, do they take feedback and are they curious? Because if they do those things, I can get them to have drive.
That's so good. I want to transition a little bit, talking about your transition. You got to a point, where it was 24/7 and you ended up transitioning, and now you do speaking, you're an author, you've written 5 books, you have a podcast, so much going on. I want to start though, and I don't know where this was in your journey, but I love the story you shared in your TEDx talk of, my hero is John Maxwell. It sounds like, for you and your family, it was your dad. Zig Ziglar was the man.
Sure.
But you actually got a meeting with Zig, which is unbelievable. Can you tell that story? And I am curious, was that when you were younger, or was that when you were looking to transition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was when I was just coming out of college and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I blew him up, his secretary, him, everybody, until he agreed to give me 20 minutes, which was unbelievable. And that was a result of seeing his books on the desk of my dad's office for years and picking them up and reading them. And I thought, wow, this is really neat. Like, I love how this man talks about human behavior and getting better. And so he was, and I never got to spend time with him after I transitioned into this space, sadly. But I think about him all the time. I have his books, still stacked. He obviously was the person that I looked to when I thought about speaking. The way he did it and how he did it was something that I wanted to, at some level, learn from, potentially emulate, et cetera. So that was at about 19, I think maybe 20. I transitioned because I wrote a book and then I wrote another one, and they sort of started getting a little bit of traction, and then companies started saying, hey, will you come and talk about your book? And so I did a little bit of that. And one day at a keynote, there was a woman in the back of the room who came up to me and said, you need to do this. And I said, what do you mean? I have like 300, I had a team of agents. She goes, you need to do this all the time. And I was like, I got a job. Like, I'm just doing this for fun. So she said, hey, let's go to lunch. And so I went to lunch with her, and really nice lady. And she said, she kind of walked me through what it could look like. And I thought, wow, this is really cool, because it was feeling so fulfilling to share these stories as a wife and a mother and a woman through the lens of sports on performance. I was able to connect with men and women. And I thought, man, this is really filling me up. And that was when it got to a point where the incoming speaking requests were such that I really needed to make a decision. And that was when I jumped and jumped over to this space, which I'm, like so many things in life, right? I sort of probably should have done it a year before I did it, but everything happens in the right timing. So I'm grateful that I did it.
Yeah. And what I resonated so much with when you told the Zig story is just, I think you asked him, how do I do what you do?
Yeah.
And he said, well, we'll go do something so you have something to say, right?
Yeah.
And I think so many times we live in a world where everyone wants to be an influencer, everyone wants to have a voice, but no one wants to do anything to actually have something to say. So, with the time we have left, I just want to dive into a few topics and just get short answers from you on them. First, I just want to talk about speaking. So one, I'll just leave it open-ended and we can deep dive. Any advice for aspiring speakers now that this is something you do full-time?
Go speak. The more you speak, the more you speak. The more you speak, the more you speak is really the biggest piece of advice. Speak. I mean, I started speaking for free at universities who wanted me to come in and talk about sports. And I did some of that just for fun, but it was great reps and I got experience. And so just start speaking. And then the sooner you can start recording it. Nobody's going to hire somebody to speak if they can't see you on a lot of stages and a lot of situations and get some good, solid, longer, shorter clips of you, because they're getting ready to put you on a stage with some of the most important people in their world, clients, employees in front of them. And they got to know that you're going to deliver in a way that's consistent with they've got to see you deliver before they're going to put you in that kind of a situation.
Yeah. You talked about, clearly you have drive, you've had it your whole life. When you started getting opportunities, you said, you eventually got so many that you had to make a decision. Was that you going out and pursuing those opportunities, or was it because of the book or the platform you had? Like what? Because I think a lot of speakers are like,
how do I do it?
How do I do that?
Well, what happened was I gave a keynote. I gave a couple keynotes in kind for fun. And then there was a guy at Merrill Lynch actually who said, hey, will you come and do will you do a keynote for our new hires? It was in Atlanta, I think. And so I did. And I think I charged like a really small number for that. Right. So I did. And after he came up to me and he said, hey, like, I want to book you to do 9 of these. Will you do 9 in all these different markets? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to do 9 of these? Right. And so I said, okay, I've got this many vacation days. I think I can do it. And when I was doing those, what happened was in the back of the room at Financial Advisor Keynotes, there's, all the people that sell to the advisors, Nationwide Insurance, Mass Mutual. I mean, they're all in the back of the room. And often when they're not mingling with the advisors, they step in and listen to the keynotes. So within that window of time of doing those 9 and the people, my phone just started ringing and the guy at Northwestern Mutual and the guy at this and the guy at that, hey, will you come and do it? And that was when it kind of got on a life of its own. And then there was a buddy of mine who was my trainer when I was a student athlete at Michigan State, who is now a speaker, speaks on health and fitness stuff. He had a woman that was sourcing and fielding his keynotes. And so I utilized her, paid her just a commission on every keynote that she booked. And she was taking those incoming requests until those got to a point where she was like, dude, I get 400 or 500 a year and do 80. Right. Wow. And so that was when and so now I have a team of about 5 folks. And I have a woman that's been beside me for 12 years, really, when I started, who takes in all the incoming speaking requests and navigates all those. But it was very organic. It happened naturally. And that's why I say the more you speak, the more you speak. Because if I believe if you deliver a compelling message and you do the kinds of things as a speaker that allow you to connect, to add value, to pour into people in a way that changes them. It doesn't just motivate them to feel better, but it changes them. Your phone will ring. It'll ring. I mean, we do no outreach at all. And so I would just tell people, get really clear. The other piece of advice I'd have is, I think sometimes speakers think I've got to have 4 or 5 topics. It's hard to be an expert on 4 or 5. Like, what is the one thing you're uniquely positioned to speak about? Go there. Don't try to be all these different things. What's the one thing that you're uniquely positioned to speak about? And then put that on your website and go speak on that.
Yeah, I'm curious. How do you think through pricing? So, I mean, you basically did this for your career. You help people determine their value, what their worth was. You negotiated. What would you advice do you give? And you have an entire book on negotiation, which I'd recommend. But, what are your thoughts on negotiation and pricing for speakers specifically, but I think just anyone with their own business?
Well, I mean, at the most basic level, it's supply and demand, right? I mean, when the demand is getting higher than you want to accommodate, you bump your fee up and you just keep bumping it up. I think the other thing, though, I would say, speaking wise, I mean, the speaker bureaus, we get booked by lots of different bureaus too. And then we book direct as well, but we quote the same fee out of our office as we do with bureaus. But bureaus can give you some comps to help you understand. But the truth is, I mean, there's one price for celebrity, and they can be a horrible speaker. Horrible. But if they're famous, they pull in an audience. So, and that's different than maybe somebody who's a John Maxwell, who's a content speaker, right? Who you referenced. So, I think my advice would be understand the market and what the market will bear. And then you've got to understand, I mean, I know speakers that probably are worth less than they quote, but they only do one a month. So they quote a high number, they do one a month, and they charge maybe 2x of what they should, but they don't want to do a lot more. So I think you've got to look at your own circumstances and what you really want. And then that becomes maybe a little bit of a lens by which you can look through it on. But, to me, we've just continued to sort of clip up as we go based on supply and demand and candidly my bandwidth and interest.
Best advice for aspiring authors? You've written 5 books.
Well, it's a weird, quirky market. Do you have a book, Doug?
I'm in the process of writing one, yes.
All right, yeah. So it's weird, it's quirky, it's all those things. I would say for a first-time author, write, the mistake I made with my first book was I wrote the entire thing. And then I went and begged publishers to try to publish it. And I could have wallpapered my apartment with rejection letters. And finally, I got a yes. Wow. I should have just written a really robust proposal, right? Not an entire book, because the publisher is going to have feedback. There's 2 models, right? There's the publisher model where you take a very small percentage, but they do all the lifting, they distribute the book, et cetera. Or if you want to self-publish and get into the distribution business and the fulfillment business, which I don't want to be in, then that's one vehicle. So just, understanding the business, understanding your goals. And, my other piece of advice on books is a lot of times I feel like I meet a lot of people that say, I've got a book, it's half written, I just want to tell people The problem is you've got to really consider who's going to buy that book. Has it ever been written? People don't really care about your story unless you're famous, probably. Otherwise, they want to know what that book's going to do for them. So I think you have to pull back and say, there's a lot of things that a lot of people want to say and they want to write about and they want to tell, but you've got to remember, why is somebody going to pay $25 and take a couple hours of their lives and read that book? And what is your promise to the reader? And a publisher told me that once. They're like, what is your promise? Like when they pick this up and spend the money and then they put it down, what has changed in their life for the better? And get out of what we want to say and get into what problem you're going to solve for somebody and why it's worth their money and their time to read it.
Wow. Well, with a few minutes we have left, I want to dive into the lightning round. A bunch of fun questions I ask leaders in every interview. And the first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
My mom, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
I would tell people to put their own quote on their own billboard.
That's awesome.
I would say, for me, it's my purpose statement. And so write your purpose statement and then put that on your billboard.
I wanted to ask this earlier, but just for time's sake, you were one of the first females in the industry, in a male-dominated industry. Any advice for women aspiring to leadership or in leadership?
In or out of sports?
Yeah.
Yeah. Be gentle on yourself. I am absolutely a hard charger, go for more, do all those things. But as a mother and a wife, be gentle on yourself. Women try to do too much and we get tired. We have a lot of people pulling on us. Some days you're going to nail it and you're going to do it all. You're going to do great at work. You're going to do great at home. You're going to do all those things. And some days you're not. And that's okay. Just be gentle on yourself.
When you get to spend time with a great leader, do you have a go-to question or two?
Well, like you on my podcast, I do rapid fire. I love to ask, what are you reading, watching, and listening to right now? Because it's always so interesting to hear what peak performers are consuming from a content perspective. That's probably one that I love love to learn from any leader at any level.
So what are you watching, listening to, and why?
Look at you. Look at you right there, man. I like it. You know what? A girl that works for me recommended a book called The Naked Mind. And I just started it. I haven't read it, but it's just really cool around what's the best way? It's basically a book about alcohol and the lens that the world has created by which we view it, and the negative impact of it, and that it's at some level really just poison. And it's just a really cool book. And part of what I think makes it really neat, and I'm just again into it, but is it shifts your view in a really cool way and in a significant way. And I think, it always boggled my mind during COVID, like, why was everything closed but the wine and liquor stores? Like, why is that? And it's money, and it's taxes, and it's whatever else is inside of that I don't even know. But as someone who travels a lot, and I go into the Sky Club at Delta, and the amount of alcohol I'm seeing consumed in the world today is making me nervous and sad. And so it's a really interesting book. It has nothing to do with anything that we've talked about, but that's what I'm reading to answer your question.
No, that interests me for sure. I will check that out. What's something that you've experienced in your life, maybe it was something on your bucket list, that you think everyone should experience before they die?
Oh my gosh. This is probably going to be a weird one, maybe, I don't know, but family. I mean, and being a parent, and maybe it's a parent of not your own kids, but, and you marry into it, or you adopt, or whatever the circumstances might be. But the greatest gift, and something I hope everybody in life can experience, is having a partner in life that you do life with, and then having children that you can share it with.
So good. Anything else? I'll just leave this open-ended. Anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
Check out my podcast, Game Changers, with Molly Fletcher. It is like yours.
So good.
So fun. And I'm super grateful to have, been blessed to interview some really remarkably cool people and share those conversations with others.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Molly, for all of your time today. We'll include links to all of that in the show notes. And I encourage people to check out all of your content. It's phenomenal. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, leader, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Molly. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find ways to connect with her and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes. And leader, I say it every episode, but if you want to 10x your growth this year, then you need to either launch or join an L3 Leadership Mastermind Group. Mastermind groups are groups of 6 to 12 leaders that meet together on a consistent basis for at least 1 year in order to help each other grow, hold each other accountable, and to do life together. For me personally, mastermind groups have been the greatest source of growth in my life over the last 8 years. If you're interested in learning more about launching or joining a group, go to l3leadership.org/masterminds or email me at dougsmith@l3leadership.org. And as always, I like to end every episode with a quote, and today I'll quote Henry Cloud, who said this. He said, "You don't have to please everyone in your life, and you don't need everyone to like you." And I think every leader on the planet needs to hear that. Well, leader, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Know that my wife, Laura, and I love you. We believe in you, and I say it every episode, but don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership.